So I watched this strange little. I mean, usually it's Hong Kong that are known to do action comedies, right? With action being mostly martial arts as opposed to anything to do with guns. But of course, if Hollywood does action comedy, it's just going to be with guns, of course, right? And so it was. With this one called Killers from 2010. Um, yeah, they really try to go for the lowest common denominator here, but it was I mean, yeah, it obviously tried to combine both elements in terms of what happened and what. And it didn't do too badly in terms of the comedy. I thought. Yeah, I've seen worse rom-coms, which end up with too much supposed romance, and not really much comedy in this case. So I think it had quite a lot of comedy. I don't think it had a surfeit of romance, which is good usually, otherwise it doesn't quite work. And it did though have a bit too much in the latter half, at least a bit too much of the shooting bit, a bit too much. Otherwise, they still integrated the comedy, alright, mostly, I suppose. Um, yeah, I'd rather watch a rom-com with even guns than just guns alone, as in, just a pure adrenaline-infused action movie, which, barely usually has anything interesting. I mean, if it doesn't have an interesting story, then they usually do not have anything at all that's interesting. Maybe music, but music alone obviously doesn't quite make a movie any better on its own. The music mostly is yeah. In this case, so yeah, it wasn't too bad. Notice the cinematography for some reason is made by the person who made the cinematography for Titanic. Not sure it has anything to do with it, but apparently he just does these sort of movies these days at any rate. But that usually they have anyway. Even directors can direct different kind of genres and such, so never mind. Yeah, so that's the point though, I think, mostly. Just the fact that as as much as you know action movies are boring because of just consistent, like you know I mentioned it a lot, and maybe I shouldn't, considering it's one of the worst movies I've watched. But as a sort of benchmark for what is bad, I suppose, and it's already well known anyway, so it's not like it's exactly giving it much coverage anyway. But yeah, Olympus Has Fallen is so brain dead, and yet of course it made so much profit. In this case, in this movie, apparently it did make profit, not as much as that one, obviously, as always. In the as usual, moviegoers follow the formula. The more brain dead movie is, the more they go. Yeah. But it's still made, So apparently, budget 75 million, box office 98 million, apparently, possibly. That's not too bad, It's not too much either. It's not doubling budgets or such or anything. But yeah, it's still yeah. Apparently, though, sure enough, critics disliked it, but the audience seemingly liked it, as evidenced in the box office as well. Um, but yeah, critics seriously disliked it. Seems like it debuted number three, though, after with Shrek Forever After number one, apparently. Yeah, did I even watch that? I think I did. Yeah, Rumpelstiltskin, right? I think I watched that. Let me check. Sometimes it's kind of interesting to do this sort of thing, where you check whether you watch something or not. Just one of those Um, and yeah, I watched it. Yeah. So yeah, this one though isn't too bad in terms of I mean I don't know what the critics what critics were expecting in terms of an action comedy though. Yeah, not bad. I mean um, Jackie Chan movies sometimes have some romance in them as well, but not too much either. So anyway, they are similar except for the weapon used, of course. Uh, no, I do prefer. I would prefer martial arts, and there was some in this movie. Not exactly a lot. Mostly they used guns, and guns is not exactly the most interesting, fascinating thing ever to watch. It's just whatever, really. But in comparison to I mean, obviously, if you just have a romantic movie, then the romance would and the story would need to be solid. Sometimes they're not, sometimes they are. With rom-coms, so even more so, and often they're not. In terms of if they put too much romance and such, and often they don't have a good story. Sometimes they do, but not too often. So it's a bit of a thing, in terms of you know how much I seem to like the comedy. In this case, mostly the comedy I'm focusing on. It wasn't too bad, as I say. It's you know, there were several funny things, like when she went on the table or something. Um, but when it comes to the thing itself, yeah, but like when the guy there was all bloodied and he apologized for bleeding on the floor, and then he asked her, "You just had this? Was it upholstered?" What he said, I'm not sure what the word was exactly. That was kind of funny though in that context, Yeah. Other than that though, um, they might have put a bit too much of these disposal squabbling in, but not that much anyway. One thing is, I don't know why they used Willie Francis Schumer instead of Nice. Like, what's the point? Apparently, they wanted to say that they're in Nice because of uh, this other Hitchcock movie that I happen to have watched as well in the past. Not sure if commented on so. Um, but I don't see the point of that. So they wanted to be in Nice because of this other movie, but then they filmed it elsewhere. Like, what's the point? Might as well just say that you're in that place, or really film in Nice if you really wanted to be in Nice. I mean, I don't get it. I don't get why how people make these decisions. Unless somehow the plot line absolutely relied on it being in a specific place, which doesn't seem like it was. So yeah, not entirely sure why. Might as well have said. I mean, sure, Nice is slightly easier to pronounce, but you know, one of those things, just really French is Sumer isn't too bad to say. There's just a bit longer. Yeah, apparently they filmed in a tributary community. Hmm. But yeah, and I'm also not sure why there was this Usher cameo. Didn't quite know who Usher was, but apparently he was that guy who talked to them in the supermarket, as who acted as a staff member. For some reason, not sure why a musician would want to have a cameo, but yeah. Of course, it's not. I mean, I don't know how long cameos are supposed to be for, but he had a few lines and he was in the scene for about 5 minutes or so. So yeah, I've seen shorter cameos. The one thing that seemed a bit weak is the end there, where somehow the her father somehow is supposed to have his reasoning for doing all this is very flimsy. If they went with the original, like if they had the assassin sent by his former employer because he left, it would be more reasonable. But somehow they went with slightly more complicated thing with her father, and somehow he's supposed to have done something as well, and he thought he was coming after him. And it wasn't really quite resolved, and somehow they became friends again, and even babysit set the child, but really wasn't very much resolved. So that's sort of a weak point. But then again, I don't know. Should this movie be judged exclusively on its plot? Its plot isn't exactly the most, just, but for its comedy, though, no, not too bad. I suppose it's whatever, really. For the plot line though is ever so slightly weak. But otherwise, as an action comedy, it's similar to other Jackie Chan movies or such, kind of. No, that's more slapstick usually. But okay, yeah.